What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Commentary for you. Want to thank my sponsor, Seal Supplements. Link and discount code down in the description, as well as Weeble. As I mentioned earlier, only a couple days left. Best promotion they've offered. Open an account, you'll get a free stock. Deposit $5, you'll get another free stock, and you could buy fractional shares of EA Sports if you think Madden 22 is going to be the greatest game ever. 2K if you want them to come back and make a football game. Whatever you want to buy, it's there for you. Clint Oldenburg, my buddy Clint Oldenburg, man, really made himself look foolish on this Making Madden podcast. He talks about dynamic gameplay and the gameplay improvements, and one of the things he focuses on in terms of explaining to you how the game is going to be different this year is all the animations that they've added, all the context of those animations for the star players, and he goes on to say something that hasn't happened in a long time is he's losing when playing offline to the computer. And this is supposed to be a barometer for us to know that the game is better playing now. So imagine him selling dynamic game day and gameplay improvements with, well, now the game's beating me and I'm not used to that. The reality with this is, anyone that's played this game knows, the game itself is going to struggle to get better the way they're building the game better. Right? Animations don't account for spectacular players. Right? Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, they're not animation dependent in their greatness. They're intelligent. They're leaders. Mike Vick was not animation dependent in his greatness. He was an exceptional athlete. Go down the list. Darryl Green, Deion Sanders, whoever you want to pull from whatever position. All these canned animations that get reused for these athletes are what damages this game. And for him to come out and say, well, now that I'm losing and I see this ebb and flow of the game, it's different. He mentions contextual awareness in this. You know, players playing smarter. They're going to touch each other when they're down. This has been something that EA has chimed about for years. Going back here to Madden 15, Player Sense 2.0. In Madden NFL 15, Player Sense creates the smartest playing Madden ever by improving player emotion, contextual awareness, head tracking, reach tackles, and more. If you go and listen to what Clint talks about, he is literally regurgitating this to a T. Contextual awareness is better now. Players reach for tackles, sideline interactions, touching a player when they're down, knowing when they're not down. I'm going to bring up another slide here in a moment, but I want you to understand that this doesn't make the game better the same way it didn't before. When he talks about contextual awareness, he says a lot about the checking. You know, players look for what's going on. This is Madden 25. Contextual awareness, offense. The whole idea is that players are able to think for themselves and do smart things automatically. On prior generations, players would often run into each other's backs, running backs would collide with linemen and bust up plays. But now, with Gen 4, we have players that will check every frame to see if they're about to run into something. They check their feet, their waist, what's happening downfield, and help to get making decisions. They also go about auto hurdle, downfield blocking, how this is going to improve. If you look at the bottom of this, it says we've also added the ability to point blockers out downfield. So if a ball carrier is looking ahead and recognizes a player 15 yards downfield, he will point out the defender. This used to be a big thing. The quarterback specifically would be known to point downfield to block. And then it goes on to talk about defensive contextual awareness on things like blitzes and tackles. Yet here we are, Madden 22, and Clint is saying the same things over and over. Because he can't say what needs to be said. The animation dependency of this game has ruined it. The limited animation of libraries has made it repetitive. And we don't really have a way of making players seem independent from each other because the game is so basic in how it plays football. What we've tried to do to combat that is create these superstar abilities and X factors that literally do the same thing that NBA Jam did and allow players to go on a run where they'll be on fire and unstoppable. And then we've carried it over to the stadiums trying to make it seem like teams are going to play independent of each other when they're not. All this really has done, in my opinion, is taken DDA, dynamic difficulty adjustment, something we've talked about as a community for years, where the game modifies your team or another person's team simply to make the game more entertaining, because if you have a more entertaining game, then you're going to be more likely to watch it. The same way you'll watch any sports game when the score is close rather than turning it off or watching something else when it's a blowout. EA takes that same thought process and pushes it into their product and makes sure that when you play someone, the fields are level, even if they have a better or worse team that you're playing. They'll nerf your team or they'll nerf the other team to make sure that you have a fun and enjoyable, fair, if you will, experience. Fair to everyone but the player that's worked, paid, however they've went to get this better team. Contextual awareness doesn't make the game any harder. It just makes the game easier to understand. Now I understand why the defensive back touched the player down. Now I understand why this player hurdled. Now I understand why this player started to tiptoe the sidelines. That's not creating a more challenging game. That's simply just making it, if anything, more simulation football because you have smarter players. But what I'm trying to show here is we've been sold this for 10 years. The only rational excuse for this is that it was in older games and they took it out, and then now they're slowly adding it back in, or it was never there in the first place and we were just sold a bunch of lies to get us to buy a new copy of a game. I would urge every single one of you to go listen to this podcast and listen to Clint and literally, in an unbiased way, ask yourself, number one, should an NFL player be getting beat by a video game? I would say no. I've watched NFL players play Madden. Generally, they execute extremely well because they can read a defense. They can read an offense. They can react at a better time than most gamers. They understand football concepts better than most gamers. So him getting beat on the game just shows me that his football IQ may not be what it once was, or may not have been what it should have been to stay in the NFL for an extended career. The fact that he's sitting here and telling us that contextual awareness has made the game harder is simply him saying, well, now that we have players doing things that are logical, the game's more difficult to play because all these things that were irrational before, like I've shown on my channel, defensive back spinning around to cover someone, when now that doesn't happen, it's more of a challenge and I can't win. These things should have never been out of the game, and we should have never been sold them if they weren't in the game. It's a really interesting podcast to listen to, and I'd urge you guys, take a little bit of time out of your day and see what they're selling you, but also go back and look at what they've already sold you and ask, how do we get to this place that we're in without somebody lying? Love to know you guys' thoughts on this. Appreciate you checking out. You know I will be back in a week with more commentary.